I think oftentimes when people buy a car on a lease, they don't understand all the moving parts or even how to calculate the moving parts and how they would be impacted. So what we're going to look at right off the website is the 2019 BMW i8 Roadster. This car is like the R8, but electric, super fast, really expensive car, which is going to make doing the numbers that much more fun, but not that much different when you buy other vehicles. In fact, the math I'm going to show you today, I used when I leased a really considered leasing a very inexpensive car, just absolute bottom line hybrid. When I used to have a big diesel pickup to pull the camper trailer with the family, I leased a car. And when I went in the dealership and showed them how I did this math, they were shocked. Nobody had ever done it before. So that's how rare this is. In fact, that was back before I had a beard. 4 years later, I go into the same dealership to get the vehicle I have now, a used Ford Explorer that we tow behind our RV, and nobody remembered me until I brought up having been the one that brought up the conversation around the lease and the real interest rate. Instantly, the finance manager remembered me. Instantly, the salesman remembered me. And they said that even since then, 4 years later, nobody had ever done this. So let's dig into it. This BMW i8 has a leasing option. And where you want to start to try and understand this, and you could do this for yourself, just practice it. You could click in here and see the full disclosure on the lease. It's going to tell you how many miles a year, how far you can drive it each year on average, and it's going to disclose the upfront and the residual buyout. So if you want to buy the car out at the end, that number's right here. Now, the real amount that is effectively financed by a lease is the difference between the MSRP and the purchase price and the residual at the end of that period. So we have a car that has $166,795 purchase price, MSRP, and a residual buyout of $96,741. Now, what we're going to do, that difference, that amount is the loan effectively that we're paying on for $2,000 a month. So we really have a 3-year loan that's covering the difference between the purchase price and the residual. So let's start looking at the actual calculation. Well, to start, it looks a little bit like this. We have an MSRP of $166,000, $6,000 down, a lease fee of $995, a residual of $96,741, and this thing called the dealer contribution of $5,200. And let's do the full math. When you get this vehicle, you're going to feel like this. The difference initially between the 166 and 196 ends up being about $63,000. The difference between, let me get these all pulled up for you so you can see all three options. All right. So the first thing you're going to see is the $70,000 note. This is the first one that they recommend. And not recommend like a negotiation, the way you might calculate it. This is kind of the default way you begin to think about it. Oh, it's $70,000 difference, purchase price to end result, 36 months. I'm paying $2,000 a month. It makes an annual interest rate feel like 2.5%. But to start with, that's not counting the fact that I had to put $6,000 down or pay a lease fee. So how I corrected for that is I made the loan that is effectively the lease term amount, the difference between the purchase price and the residual, and reduced it by the amount of money we put down on the car and the lease fee. Now we have $63,000. Now, when I did this at Ford years ago, it was considered zero down, but $3,500 up like Ford credit lease fee. So you got to be careful how they really frame these up. The amount we're putting in, paying toward it, $2,019 a month for 36 months. Now suddenly, this is a 9.9% loan. You see, like suddenly, even though it looks like 2.5 on the surface, even though most people don't even do the first calculation. Why? Because we're just focused on payment and how far we're going to drive and if we feel good about it. Well, these numbers are going to really cause some significant erosion to your wealth, even if you're getting a BMW i8, because you may not realize what you're actually paying is 9.9%. And it gets a bit worse than that, because if on top of taking into account our down payment, on top of taking into account the lease fee, if we also take into account that there's dealer money that we gave up, we're now up in credit card rate ranges. And that could be, I've got it here at 19, but it's about 15 to 19% is the total amount that we end up paying toward this vehicle over 3 years on an enormously expensive vehicle on top of everything else. So we have to be really aware of what it's actually costing us to lease this car. Now, I joked earlier about the reasons you might lease a car. And there's even a few times it can make sense from a tax perspective, but this is why. It may sound silly. Even if you're only getting a $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 car, it might be like, oh, it's not a big deal. I would encourage all of you, these are big deals. These are 5-figure purchases, to pause long enough, look at your balance sheet. If you don't know how to do the math we're doing right now, Google, find some calculators, lease versus purchase calculators, or if you're a client of ours, reach out to us. We're happy to walk you through this math. It doesn't take that long. And you can always walk away from the dealership, do the math later, and then come back and buy the car. Despite all the techniques of trying to keep you in the dealership and making a decision, you really can wait a day, make the decision, do the math, and then be able to go back well-informed. If you don't get that car, there will be other cars. So I want to encourage all of you to not just think about, I'm in a buying decision. In fact, you're not in a buying decision for a car. You're in a transaction that affects the rest of your financial life. And the bank is not lending you money on the car. What are they lending you money on? It's a lien against all of your future income. Now, that's where, we've talked before about money not being math and math not being money. We've got a great white paper on that Cory has written. If you've not read that, I would encourage you to go to this episode's page that we're borrowing.sfgwa.com, borrowing.sfgwa.com. Get in there, look at this paper, download it, read it, because what you start to understand is that money's not math, math is not money. It really does, I think in a way most people don't understand, weighs on our ability to do the work that we would do every time we put a lien against our future income. Going all the way back, if you had a tank of money that represented every dollar you were ever going to earn, and you never had to work again, so you couldn't trick yourself into thinking that we're going to have pure optimism. I'm currently making $400,000 or $500,000 a year. That's going to continue in the future. I'll be making $1 million soon. That may all be true. But what we want to reflect on is that optimism oftentimes is what these other institutions, these large corporations, use to market to you to get you to make decisions that may not be good for your long-term financial future. This is a clip to our weekly podcast. So if you like this content, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and go over to your favorite podcast app and subscribe to Sound Financial Bites so you can get our full weekly show. And as always, if our philosophy resonates with you and you want to chat with me or one of our advisors about our philosophy, see if it applies to you and your family, just follow the instructions in the description below.